Hey everyone, welcome to the Recruitment Show. We are talking about all of the major topics that people are discussing right now. Everything recruiting, future of work, and everything in between. I've got guests from all over the world to come and share their perspective and their thoughts and feelings and all of that stuff on these key topics. It might not be politically correct. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's people's perspectives, and it's important to hear people's perspectives. I love storytelling, and I think one story can illuminate a million more and really increase our understanding of these topics. So sit back, whether you're watching live or after, grab a drink, take a seat, and enjoy.
Real government.
Brilliant. Go on. Sorry, the real government you're going to say. Welcome,
Yeah,
Sean.
the real government name is Sean Uck. That's my real name, and that's how it's pronounced. But I've always used Sean because it's been so much harder for people to pronounce Sean Uck in college in America, or we work with a lot of European customers. So that's what it is.
So you went to college in where are you from? You went to college in America. What's the story?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in India. I grew up with my dad in recruiting. So my dad was the country manager for Randstad in India. Randstad is the world's largest staffing company. So growing up from the time I was 5 years old till I was a teenager, Dad grew Randstad's business from like 90 consultants to 2,300 consultants in India. They're a large business in India. They're market leaders, all the way from blue collar contract staffing, white collar contract staffing, perm recruitment, to an executive search practice with a few dozen consultants. They sort of do everything in this market. And so I grew up with sort of like a recruiting background. Dad did pretty well at that firm, and that paid him well, and he used that money to pay for my rip-off American college education.
Was it worth it?
I still think it was a rip-off, right? But I'm the type who would say that probably you don't even need to go to college if you're not studying to be like a doctor, or you're not trying to become like an astronaut. You probably don't need to go to college. But so that's a personal belief. But yeah, we did spend a couple $100,000 on my college education, which is quite a ripoff. But I went to college at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, which is in the Midwest, a 3-hour drive from Chicago, and it was a big public state school with 40,000 students, and I think 20 colleges within the university. It was a pretty epic American college experience, right, in a college town. So I loved it.
Nice. That's worth the money. A nice American college experience.
It was pretty crazy. You'd have the whole because as anyone who's outside of America, right, you would watch movies and you would see fraternities and sororities and that whole culture, and actually living through that is a pretty surreal experience. So I did enjoy that. Right, that was pretty fun. So
it's like you saw in the films.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly like that. Like, you'd be surprised. It is that crazy. It is. It's pretty ridiculous. It's pretty ridiculous.
I love it. And then after university, you went back to India, or
no? Yeah, sure. So I finished. So I did a 4-year program in about 2 years and 7 months. The great part about America is you can take more classes and finish credits and graduate early. And I sort of was forced to do that because in my sophomore year, which is the second year of college, I started a startup for local commerce, and we raised $250,000 in venture capital. I was 19. So it was myself and 2 co-founders and $250,000 of cash. And we were still in the second year of college with 2 years left. So our investors were like, what are we going to do about this? So we all just graduated quickly. And so 2 of us graduated quickly. 1 of us dropped out, and we moved to San Francisco to run that startup. We spent over a year working on it after coming out, graduating, but it didn't take off. So we all went our separate ways. One of my co-founders went to business school at Cornell and works at a fintech company now. Another one works at another crypto fintech type company. And I went back to India and started RecruitCRM, which is what I do right now.
Love it. I had a great start. We've just started in India. We've got a great colleague in Mumbai called Annika. Yeah. 1.6 billion people living in India. What a
Huge
great place
market.
to recruit. Massive
Huge
market. Very, very smart group of folks. In fact, we just did a podcast today actually, and there's something like, I don't know where the poll was from. I think it was the Indian Times or something, but something like 75% of Indians are investing in online learning, and there's a real sense of just continued learning and development. And with all the stuff going on in the world, it's just a really good mindset and mentality to have.
And the demographic is insane. We have one of the youngest populations on the planet for a country our size, or anywhere close to our size, right? Because there's no country quite India's size, because we're the most populous country on the planet as of a couple months ago. So there's a lot of young talent, and there's massive opportunity in utilizing that talent to serve the global market.
Another interesting stat for you in India. So there's 58% of people who left their job recently left because of a toxic boss. Wow. Not because of career progression, not because of money, because they don't like their boss. So I thought that was really interesting as like things that evolve in India, and culturally and all of this kind of stuff. It's super interesting. That was then last useful stat. I listened to a lady from McKinsey talk a couple of days ago.
Another reason in India, and this is unique in India, right? Because of the population pyramid and because of the demographics, where every year you have more young people hitting the workforce than you did the year before, right? Which is very unique. And there's a huge price escalation as people go from year 1 to year 10. For example, large tech companies in India can probably hire an entry-level engineer, not the top 1% of engineers, but like a middle of the pack engineer in India today, anywhere from $4,000-$5,000 a year to like $8,000 a year, right? Which is crazy. But
and they're decent, and they're good engineers, right? I mean, these are good engineers.
These are middle of the pack. So these aren't quite the engineers that like Amazon or Apple would hire, or even we would hire at RecruitCRM. But like they're still getting hired at like the big IT outsourcing companies like TCS and Infosys and Cognizant and so on. So these are the ones doing all the hardcore back office stuff, not building products, but delivering services. But the crazy thing is most of these people would effectively double their salaries within 2 to 3 years. And then they would double their salaries again in another 3 to 4 years. That doesn't happen in Western markets. So if someone starts at X thousand pounds in the UK, 6 years in, they're not making 4X. That's not normal.
No.
Here it's very
normal. How long will that last in India for, though? I mean, they'll come to a point where...
So what happens is the growth is very steep if you're above average, because the huge challenge in India is we have a huge amount of like latent talent, right? But we still, and you see a lot of the top tier talent. So when you see a lot of the Indians who go to Oxford and LSE, in Harvard or Cornell, that's the top 0.1% of talent. But if you take the average talent, they haven't had the resources and the education and schooling that's required to truly be top tier engineers. So if you're doing well, you can really go all the way up to like $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 in India without having to leave the country over 10, 12, 13 years. So you could go from being a 22-year-old making what is considered very low income in the Western world to a 32, 33-year-old making a globally competitive wage. And then you normalize.
Which goes far locally, right?
Yeah, which goes very far locally. Because if you're making $100,000 or $80,000 in India, you have a chauffeur, you have a cook, you have a maid, you have a lot, which you don't at similar levels of compensation in London or in New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you still seeing then people leave India for better opportunities? Because there's always been the case.
Sure, at lower rates though.
Oh, okay, right. So it's slowed.
Yeah. So the thing is, back in the good old days in the 90s and in the early 2000s, because I have a lot of so another unique stat in my family, I am the only person of my generation that's still an Indian citizen by passport.
Right.
I have no cousins and no uncles and aunts who are Indian citizens.
And is that And is
because they went to America in the 80s and 90s, right?
Right. Okay. And they
They've
just
been in
gave up their
America.
passports and became Americans.
Yeah, they moved to America in the 80s. They were citizens in the 90s or early 2000s, right? 20 years ago. And their kids were sort of my generation. The only reason we didn't do that is because dad was a commando in the Indian Army before Randstad. And so we're very patriotic, right?
Right.
So no matter how I sound, I'm never giving up the passport, right? It's just for
It's your culture, your heritage, your history. Now, what about now then? As many people like leaving to US, Europe, whatever, or staying put now, or even coming back?
No, this is the crazy step. 20 years ago, you would not hear about people coming back. Today, you like for example, I went back, right? Though I'm not quite back. I'm traveling across the world now, but 20 years ago, people would assume it was crazy for someone to go spend a couple $100,000 studying at a college in America and then coming back to India. That would be just ridiculous, right? The only people that would do that are people who owned like billion-dollar company with families like had generational wealth, right? But you would not have a situation where someone that was well off but not quite like crazy rich come back. That would just not happen. But that started to happen because there's so much opportunity. This is a $3 trillion+ GDP economy that's growing at 7, 8, 9% a year. That's ridiculous, and is expected to grow at those rates for the next 2 decades. And so every year there's another 250, 300, $350 billion worth of GDP created, which is consumption created, which means there's that much more worth of product you could sell, right? So you could every segment is becoming bigger. Every consumption segment.
Back in the 90s, then let's use the 90s as an example. There was value and kudos to going abroad to learn. Let's say America is an example here, right? So we can learn something from the Americans. Let's send our kids to university there if we can afford it. They'll pick up knowledge and they'll have better opportunities to earn more money and things like that. Is that still the case now? The economy is growing so much. Like, are you seeing more people choose to be educated in India even if they can still go to the US?
For some folks, yes. So people that are getting into the absolute top tier of universities, yes, that does happen. Also, what we see more of is people coming back once they're in their 30s and 40s because of a unique trend. Because of our population pyramid, as professionals, compensation, the difference in compensation levels when you're in your first, second, third, fourth year versus the US or even the UK are huge. But by the time you are at a director level or a vice president level, which is 10, 12, 15 years out, the difference is far lower. And in purchasing power parity in PPP terms, you're actually better off here. So for example, if you're an entry level engineer or out of a mid-tier school or tier 1 school, let's say in India, and you're making $10,000 here, in America you're probably making $80,000 or $90,000, and in, let's say in the UK you make maybe £40,000, $50,000, right? It's a little bit lower than the US. But the moment you hit the director level or the VP level, you're making $120,000, $130,000 in India, right? As a vice president at a larger business. In the US, you're probably making 2 or 2.5 times that. In the UK, you're maybe making 1.5 times that. So the delta goes from a 6x differential at the beginning of your career to like a 2x differential 15 years in. But it's way cheaper to live in India for
way cheaper. Absolutely. And if you have, and if you still have family there, there's a draw there to go home and things like that.
It's huge, and everything is cheaper, right? University is cheaper, food is cheaper, healthcare is way cheaper. Like everything is cheaper, and everything is cheaper not by like 20%. It's like 1/3 the price, right? Rents are 1/3. Everything's 1/3. So it's pretty crazy. So your lifestyle actually goes up. Yeah, because imagine this, right? If you're going to make half as much as you did in a developed country, but everything's 1/3 the price, your standard of living actually goes up, and taxes are actually lower in India than they are. So if you're at that level in the UK and you're making £200,000, your blended tax rate is about 42 to 43%. In India, with deductions and stuff, you're in the 30% range, or 32, 33%. And that's quite a difference. That's
massive. Or Middle East, almost barely not paying anything, right?
Yeah, I'm in Dubai. I pay 0.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
There we go.
So
Well, I mean, tax is a big thing. It
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
income tax, corporate tax, the whole thing. It plays a
yeah.
big part for sure. Fascinating stuff. I love it. I'm really into India. I think we started there, recruiting local. All of the clients we work are global anyway, and it's really
Yeah.
really interesting. I love that.
You need to pick the right market in India, and you need to have patience because it's going to take a while for you to
Oh
really
yeah,
build something significant,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But if
yeah.
you're looking a decade in, it's a growth market, right? So it's not the market you're going to enter immediately and start producing crazy amounts of cash in a year. But 10 years from now, you're going to make a lot more money than you did today as it goes from a $3 trillion economy to a 7, 8, $10 trillion economy.
Absolutely. I heard Apple opened their first 2 iStores or
Yeah,
Apple
yeah,
stores the
yep,
last
very
couple of months or
recently.
something.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
recently, yeah.
yeah. Because for the longest time, Apple used like resellers to sell. So they would work with local companies that would resell products, but you wouldn't have quite the Apple Store experience, right? That
Yeah, yeah.
huge, massive. Yeah, yeah. So that's huge.
That's crazy. When I heard that, I was like, really? They haven't been there before?
No,
And
they just weren't there direct. Like you would just
yeah, they
have
hadn't committed.
another company, and then you would have like a premium Apple reseller written on their like the
Yeah,
board or
on the little,
whatever.
by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
they probably didn't want to take the risk of managing logistics locally, so they would just partner with local companies, send them the product, and they'd resell them.
And they do the thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that. Love that. Let's move on to recruiting.
yeah, of course.
But specifically, I'm really interested in AI. Like, let's talk a little bit about AI.
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely fascinating what's going on now. And what do you think about this? Like, let's talk about the CV and the cover sheet. And you've got,
yeah,
you have people able to, you're able to, let's be honest, right? I mean, you've got, let's say, ChatGPT or Jasper or whoever you use,
yeah.
doesn't really
Sure.
matter. But you can copy and paste the job description for a job in there. You can ask it to write or bespoke your CV. You can ask it to write a bespoke cover letter. Where are you on the value of a CV and a cover letter now?
It's I'll tell you what AI is going to do is AI is going to at a very high level, right? And AI is still evolving, including things like GPT. Their models constantly getting better. It only truly hit the mass market probably 6, 8, 10 months ago. So over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're gonna see it be far more effective than it is today.
Oh yeah,
right. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing. It's not about what the tech can do today. It's about what it will be able to do in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. What tech is going to do is it's going to reduce a lot of the admin work that you do as a recruiter, updating your CRM, manually reading through documents to find keywords, writing emails and copying and pasting them 20 times. Like a lot of the mundane stuff we have probably done in our recruitment career, writing notes after after a phone conversation. All of that's going to get automated, right? Because it's going to listen to your audio, boop, it's going to like write a call log a lot better than the recruiter could actually do it, right? It's going to write notes a lot better. It's going to improve your emails, right? Based on emails that have worked or not worked, it's going to say, hey, Lewis, when you send this email and you use these words, you have gotten responses 10% more often than this other way you've been doing it. We're going to use that. But what AI is not going to be able to do, right? And you need to be a recruiter to understand this, is manage relationships, right? So what's going to happen is AI is going to increase the difference between the top consultants and like the mid-tier or like crappy consultants even more, right? Because in a hyper specialized market, it's the top 1% of talent that makes even more money now and produces even more. Because what happens is their time is now purely spent what they're good at, building relationships, having conversations, and convincing folks. Because at the end of the day, executive search consultant or recruiter's job is a sales job. And every minute that salesperson is doing selling on a conversation and not writing email and not writing admin is another minute where you can produce revenue and not do admin.
Yeah.
So I think
I love
it's a
that.
huge game changer. So one of the big things you'd see over 3, 4, 5 years as the technology is more commercialized and more usable by your top consultants, you're basically going to see top consultants being able to produce 30, 40, 50% more revenue because they're able to spend 30, 40, 50% more time having conversations than doing admin. Because today consultants probably spend half their time doing admin, even the best ones. Or you try to outsource it, you get them a research assistant, or you're like, or you get them like an EA and stuff like that. You're not going to need that.
Yeah. No, I'm all over that. So if you think about absolutely. I mean, while the tech does tech things, we do human stuff, right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm all for that. I want to spend as much time having a conversation with a human as possible, because it's all people buy from people. And you're right. Yep. And the longer you're in the game for, like you think about the best recruiters that you know, they've been in the same space for a long time. And they've got some good mates, and those good mates happen to be the head of talent acquisition at this firm or the CHRO at that firm. And you can spend, like people like to use people and use their friends and stuff. And
I actually have a converging opinion on this. I think search firms, people that are doing mid to high value recruitment, they're going to make more money, right? Because if you're a good consultant, you're going to be able to make more money. People doing blue collar recruitment are going to get slaughtered. Because the less the work you're doing is about having conversations, and the more operational it is, which is basically you're picking up the phone and telling someone to go to a certain place, that's going to get automated.
Well, I mean, it's also I agree. I mean, think about those two examples that you gave. So exec searches, you get paid for your time, right? We get paid up front, a third, whatever the structure might be. And they've, you're an extension of their function, and you're the consultant and stuff. The other stuff, the blue collar, if you're in that space, you're a commoditized recruitment consultant. Like you're not getting paid unless your candidate gets a job.
And it's sort of like investment banking, right? In investment banking, you have investment bankers doing IPOs that you can't automate. They have to have conversations with executives. They need to do a roadshow, show the company to a bunch of institutions and get them to buy in and anchor a purchase. That can't get automated, and tech will only help them do more. And then you have traders who are just picking up the phone and making transactions happen. That's going to get automated like hell, because like that job doesn't require a human, right? A machine can do it.
Yeah. It's massively revolutionary. Yeah. I mean, it's infiltrating everything we do.
Yeah.
And I think with recruiting, you're right. I mean, we use it loads, right? For a bunch of different things. I mean, even LinkedIn, and they've got some really cool stuff, so recruiters can spam potential clients more often with their drip email campaigns.
If you were in an executive search firm, Lewis, I bet you're doing you generate executive search reports for your clients, right? Weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever, right? You run a search, you're sending them 2, 3, 4, 5 reports. For the longest time, and I don't know how you do this at your firm, but for the longest time, firms would have a research assistant, like a full-time employee, whose entire job was basically just making those pretty documents and talking to the consultant, being like, what should I write in this? And the consultant sort of telling them what to write in it. And
so you're like a million percent right.
Yeah,
a million percent right. The time our team spends generating those lists has gone from this amount to I mean, 90%. It's incredible. And they can now spend time speaking with people, which is where our value is, right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and it's happened so quickly as well.
Yeah.
Like so quickly. The way we source, the way we do the reports, the way we, all of these different little time-consuming things.
It's
massive game changer. Massive. And it frees us up to do the things that we really love, which is having conversations, making friends, talking, all of that kind of stuff. What about let's move on to the recruiting process. So forget the recruiters for a second. And just think about someone applying for a job. So they're applying for a job at your firm, Sean, and they get your job description, and they're like, okay, cool. He's looking for XYZ. Let me put that into my AI, ask it to write me a beautiful cover sheet, and maybe bespoke my CV, and then I can apply to Sean and see if I get the job interview. So that's happening loads now, right? Loads. Then you say, oh wow, this person's amazing, right? Yeah. What a great cover sheet, an amazing CV. Let's interview them. So then the candidate puts your job description in the AI and says, well, what questions do you think Sean's going to ask me based on the job description that he wrote? And what do you think the model answers that he's going to hear are? Yeah. And that's also happening a lot. So do we think the CV, resume, the classic interview process is kind of dead now, but people don't want to admit it? What are your kind of thoughts on all of that?
It depends. It depends on the role, right? Because the interview itself has a lot of bias, right? So whenever you're doing the interview, you have prejudice based on your life experiences. So when you interview somebody, Lewis, and I interview somebody for the same job, I would care about different things and you would care about different things. So it suddenly becomes very subjective instead of an objective assessment. Now, there are certain roles where you do have an objective assessment, which is like you're an engineer, you need to do a coding test and you need to be able to solve X amount of challenges in 7 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes or whatever. And in those cases, I actually think it's fine to use ChatGPT or other tools online, because when you're actually doing your job, you will use those tools. It's like when you're taking a math test, you're allowed to use a calculator, but you need to know what the formulas are and what formula to use when. It's not going to do it for you, right? Because you should be able to use the tools that are available to you to do your job on a day-to-day basis, to do the interview. So Definitely. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I don't see that being a problem. What needs to happen is the interviewer needs to understand that this is happening, and then adapt the interview to what they care about. Hey, what are the unique things that you can't copy and paste into ChatGPT that we care about while hiring this person? And we hire them, and maybe even test how well they can write prompts, because writing prompts on GPT or similar tools is going to be a skill set of its own. Right.
Absolutely. It's as good as the info you put in. Although there are some now that they have the enhance input button, right?
Yeah.
So you can write something, enhance it, and but I think you're right. I think you've got to use all tools available to you, and often actually want people with that kind of mindset, right? Who are on on the front lines.
Google. I remember when I started my career, right? Because I started fairly recently, right? I started working in 2016. It would be cool when you would find someone like an intern or a fresh graduate who could Google really well. Because if someone Googled really well, you were like, hey, this person's able to Google the right things and learn the right things. Now it's upgraded because like you just talk to GPT. So the learning curves have gotten shorter and shorter. And what we're going to see is we're going to slowly see people who are 2, 3, 4 years into the job being able to perform like people 8, 10 years into the job. In many cases,
or even or freeze them up to all these tasks we talked about that for recruiters. Freeze them up to do the stuff that's important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because the concept is no longer you start your career and you do grunt work for 5 years before you start doing real work. You just start doing real work because all the grunt work's automated.
It's done. Yeah, I mean, who's going to hire them? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But for those hiring that aren't on the ball though, because there's a lot of folks. I mean, there's got to be. I mean, probably way more people that aren't up to speed on this stuff, right? There's some VP somewhere, VP of whatever they might be, who's like, chat what? GPT, or they've just heard about it in the news. It's never gonna take off, But they're hiring.
But people said that about Google as well. Right? Like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Internet will never take off. Google will never take off. AI, you just hear it all the time. Right?
You'd have people who wouldn't write emails and still send telegraphs for the first couple of years, and then be like, okay, this is really inefficient. Let's let's switch to emails, and we can't fax things up anymore. Right?
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think this is the world we're in right now. Fact. It's only going to get better. That's the great thing about all these AI tools. They're good now. They're going to be even. I mean, you said it yourself, like 5 years time or whatever. I mean, it's like there's still a debate on remote work today, but in 5 years, the market itself will dictate what's right and what works and what doesn't work. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think for you and for people now hiring or in senior leader positions, and stuff, you've got to flow with these things, right? And just because it wasn't like that 5 years ago or 4 years ago, things are changing now. So you have an eye to the future, but also the present. Like, what is it like right now? It's a new day. If you're hiring, it's today, right? And you want to hire the best folks, and you got to just take the time to think about what that looks like and what your interview process looks like. Like, for example, you said you just hired someone in India, right? I imagine when you hired someone in India, you didn't go fly to India, set up an office, rent it out, go to the government office, create a company, create a bank account, spend 6 months doing that, then hire the first person. I bet you did not do that. But if you were doing the same thing 10 years ago in 2013, that's what you would have to do, because there's no way you would just get on a video call on WebEx or Skype or whatever and say, okay, you're hired. I want to wire you money every month. Let me tell you, I mean, we're fully remote now. I don't care where anyone's based. And so
Exactly.
Annika applied for our job. Annika Aurora in Mumbai.
Yeah.
She's wonderful. And you know, we decided the kind of things we're looking for. Many of those things were the soft skills or human skills.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the other stuff you can teach, but she had it. I mean, she had it all. And that's it. I didn't go there. She's been here a few times. I haven't been there yet, but we hired a remote. Done. Now you're right. Like maybe 5 years ago, we wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. You'd freak out. You'd be like, that's just weird. Like, well, let's just focus on what we have here. Let's focus on the people that can drive to work or take the metro to work within 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And then that limits your talent pool.
Yeah. Let me tell you, it's incredible. Like, she's an incredible person, does a great job. It has so many benefits for our company. And for me, my mindset now is I give people my trust off the bat, and you go from there. And the classic is, you know, earn my trust.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. And now it's just if you can measure their success and outcomes and things, who cares when and where they work? Doesn't matter. You know, it's really interesting.
It's awesome.
I love it. Do you guys are you guys fully remote? How are you structured now? You're fully remote as well?
We're remote only. So we were first office only till COVID hit us, or a few weeks before COVID hit us. Fun fact: RecruitCRM is a family-owned software company. I started it with my dad, who has staffing and recruiting experience. So it's I and him. We own the company. We're bootstrapped. And when COVID hit us, we were about 18 people in the office all together. And our philosophy was, if someone's coming to work, they wear a suit and they drive to work. Or if they're not selling, they're not wearing a suit, but they're still wearing formals and they're driving, commuting, taking the train, whatever, to work, and they have to be at work, you know, between 9 and 10 a.m. and they get out at like 5, 6, 7. Like, it was a very, very, you know, you scan your ID card to come in, like very boring traditional structure. Classic. You know, COVID happened. And then we had to go remote, so we set up all of the tools and stuff to go remote. We read about what we need, how do you track performance, how do you set KPIs, how do you run all hands and stuff like that. A month into COVID and the company being remote, I and Dad were sitting at home and we looked at each other and we were like, "This is awesome," right? Because we feel like people are like more productive now than they were before.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And we're a hardcore company, right? Like, well, when I say that, I mean like. We believe people should be able to work whenever they want to work, however they want to work, but we track when they work. So we use HubStaff, which is a tracking tool. People basically clock in and clock out on their computer whenever they want to work or not want to work. They can work in the mornings, afternoons, nights, whenever they want, but we want them to clock it. So it's like an online timesheet, basically, effectively. And that's important because if you're trying to rapidly scale, so we went from 18 people in 2020 to about 150 people now.
Big. Yeah.
And we went, those 18 people were just in one city. Now we're in 53 locations.
And so is this 18 in India to start with?
18 in India to start with, but now the 150 are across 5 countries on continents, all continents, all time zones.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And interesting whether you would have had that kind of growth and success.
We wouldn't. We might have had that revenue growth, but like setting up those, I'll give you one clear example, right? We might have even grown this much, but we would have raised venture capital. So we are one of those few software companies that's over $5 million in revenue, in subscriptions, not even revenue, just subscription revenue. And has never raised venture capital. We've not raised $1.
Really?
And
wow.
Yeah,
that's
and
good.
We've not,
that's very good.
And we've not even put in that much of our own money. Like, you know, we put in like probably $60,000-$70,000. Dad put in when we started this. We have over a couple million in the bank now, just from operations, and we've never had to raise money because we make money every month. We make, you know, we operate at 30+% cash flow margins every single month. You know, 30% of what revenue we collect adds to the bank balance every single month. And that wouldn't have been possible if we weren't remote, because if we weren't remote, the moment we would say that, hey, we need a European presence and we need someone who speaks French, we would say, okay, now we need to set up a company in France, and we need a lawyer in France, and then we need an accountant in France, and then we need to fly to France or send someone from our existing team to France who knows nothing about French culture, Go there,
Yeah.
build an office, hire 5 people, build a hub. That costs a lot of time, money, and effort, right? And if you need to do that, we have French-speaking team members, we have Portuguese-speaking team members, we have Spanish-speaking team members, we have people in Brazil, we have people in El Salvador, we have people in Mexico. I'm in Dubai. We have people in Africa. Like it's so much effort, right? It wouldn't happen.
It's massive. And for those,
Yeah.
and just as a quick note for those that are listening that don't know, most tech firms, if not all, are raising every 18 months and they're not
Yes.
making any money. And they have to have an event to make money.
Yeah.
So either sell, PE, IPO, whatever.
Yeah. We make over $2 million in free cash flow every single year. And more, and growing, right? We'll probably make more the next 12 months. But the thing is, if we were on the traditional venture track, to get to 5+ million in subscriptions, the average venture-backed company is raising between $10 to $15 million, and they've probably burned most of it to get to this point.
Most of their company for that.
Yep. And that's normally across 3 rounds. You raise a couple million in your seed, then you raise a 5 or 6 million Series A when you're at $1 million or $2 million in subscriptions, and then by the time you get to our stage, you're raising maybe another $10 or $15 million. So you're raising 15, 16, 17 million, off which you burn like 10 or 12 to get here. And that's still a good outcome. Yeah.
Mentally, it must be very tiring burning £1 million a month. Can you imagine?
It's beyond stressful. I can't even imagine it. Like no. I like making £150,000 a month in profit, right? Like
who doesn't like to make money, right? I mean, it's a business. You're supposed to make money, right?
Yeah. No, and you sell yourself the dream, right? You're like, no. This is a growth company, so we keep burning money for the next 4 years, and we keep stressing ourselves out. And you count a 0 cash date. You're like, hey, we're going to run out of money in 9 months. And so I need to start raising money and need to keep. And imagine the amount of time you waste trying to raise money. Because most founders I've talked to that are my stage spend about 20 to 30% of their time across the year just fundraising, which means you're not talking to your customers or working on your product.
Probably more than that.
Yeah. Probably and you more. Spend, and in today's market, more than that, because it's not as easy and you have to pitch like 100 people. And then you do these board meetings, and investors are great in understanding the mechanics of raising more money. Investors are terrible in terms of understanding your business because they've not really done your business. So even if you go to like I run a software company, if you go to a software investor, they understand the mechanics of a software business, but they'll know nothing about recruiting or building software for recruiting or, so you're going to a board meeting and trying to explain to them what you're trying to build. Right, and you're explaining to them what a cover sheet is, for example, in many cases, or what a long list is, and what a short list is, and what a search report is, and so on and so forth. And it's just an absolute waste of time because that's time you could have spent recruiting for your team, selling to new customers, making existing customers happy.
Yeah. No, great, love that. If you can do it the way you've done it, and I've done the same. I mean, we have not taken any investment either, and we've built it, and it's great. Many people though, they have to raise cash, I guess.
Yeah.
Developing something, need the money,
Yeah, if you're building the next Chat GPT and you need like millions of dollars worth of chips just to process that data model, sure, you need GPT. If you're trying to build the next Uber, maybe you need, or the Amazon, and you need fulfillment centers, and you need on-the-ground operations, sure. But if you're starting the next business software company, right, where you're selling software, you're not making physical products, or you're starting a new recruiting firm, why would you sell 30, 40, 60, 70% of your company when you should just be going out there and selling your services and making money the first couple months?
Absolutely. And also, can I just let you in a secret? It's really fun too. Like it's fun. Like this process of doing business and making money and building, and it doesn't have to be like the end thing,
you go through, you enjoy the process, and the process instantly becomes fun the moment you're cash flow positive, because the moment you're cash flow positive on either a monthly, a quarterly, or even yearly basis, you're immortal as a company. So your company ain't going to die, or is not going to die unless you screw it up. And so versus if you're on the venture track, you're generally burning money because you need to chase these crazy growth rates. Because venture capital investors need you to do triple, double, which means your business needs to be tripling every single year. And to triple every single year, you need to burn a lot of money, right? Because you need to be tripling your headcount, you need to be tripling your customers. A lot of things break when you're trying to run that fast.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. So
yeah, and then you have to go back to your customers and try to increase prices on them or something if you're not growing, and it puts you on this negative spiral where you have a lot of angry stakeholders.
Man, it's tiring. I think if you're in that game, and I know many are.
Yeah,
so
many.
but to
Most
not
are.
to knock it, most are.
Are.
But if you can start a business and do it in the right way and have patience and have a long-term view,
yeah,
it's a really good journey.
Yeah, and that model works if your horizon is like a 5, 6, 7 year horizon, and you're hoping to get out and get a big exit, and you own 10% of $100 million or $200 million or whatever. But the thing is, only like 3, 4, 5, 6% of companies make it there. Out of all the companies that raise money, I think I read a stat somewhere that over 90% of venture capital returns are driven by 2% of the investments or 2% of the companies. So if you're not those 2% of companies, you're probably not making a lot of money. At best, you're returning money back to your investors, and you're not happy. And it's far harder. I feel like it's harder running a venture-backed company than a non-venture-backed company once you get to your initial scale. Yeah,
you got the pressure. When you take someone else's money, the game changes.
Yeah,
where it really does change, right? You've got a lot of other pressures, and you're right. Most don't quite make it. It's a hard game.
And no fault of the founder or the entrepreneurs, right? Because it's just that much harder. Because the moment you're trying to start building a company that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds or billions of dollars, you build that company in a way where having a $5 or $10 million outcome is not success; it's a failure, because you've raised more than that, right? And you've burned it pretty inefficiently. So now you have no choice.
That's true. Sean, that's a lovely place to end, my friend. Lovely place to end.
Of course. Of course.
Thank you so much for joining me. Really interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Was
fun. I'm sure you won't mind, but anyone want to follow Sean, connect with him on LinkedIn. I guess you're probably on Twitter and all of those places too. Really lovely conversation.
LinkedIn's the best place.
LinkedIn, my main platform too. But no, thank you very much. Good luck with everything. Really good to chat.
It was fun chatting with you. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do not forget to subscribe in all the usual places: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you like to watch or listen to a podcast. Any comments or feedback, please drop us a DM. If you've got anything that you want us to discuss, again, feel free to get in touch.